Hello and welcome to the Mindful Messenger Show brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Media Project. My name is Amanda Johnson, and today we are talking to Cheryl Herrick about mindful personal and business growth. In the early 1990s, Cheryl found herself at the helm of a small medical device business, which she helped to grow from a little break-even company to $4 million in sales with 85% margins in only a few years. She insists that the reason they were able to do it was because they had a solid method for running the business, the method known as the System of Profound Knowledge, developed by Dr. W. Edwards Deming. Cheryl has successfully repeated the use of the method in the retail sector and service-based businesses, including self-development sectors, as well as product-based businesses. Recently, she left her post as the co-general manager of a 100-employee company to pursue consulting and coaching because her new programs combine her love of entrepreneurial business and auto racing, which means that you might want to buckle up before you listen to this interview. Welcome, Cheryl.
Hi, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited for you to be here, and I'm not joking about buckling up and maybe throwing a helmet on because it's always fast and furious when we talk, and we've been having conversations like this forever. So I just can't wait for people to be able to listen in and hear some of the wisdom that I've been able to gain from you over the years.
So you realize it's over 10 years now.
I can't believe it.
I know.
Yeah, that's a really long time. We met, so the last interview that everyone saw, it was with Amandra McClendon, who was she was one of the leaders in the program that you and I met in.
Mm-hmm. She was.
2007.
Long time ago now.
Yeah, long time ago. So, but I know that your personal growth journey started many, many moons before that. So I would love to know, for you, when and where were you the first time you thought about changing the world?
Well, getting ready to do this show, I was kind of reflecting and kind of thinking about some of the questions that you ask us to think about before we come on the show. And I actually remembered something that I hadn't thought about in forever, which is when I was about 10 years old, I had this idea to start a club to do something good in the world. But here's the deal. I didn't know what we were going to do, and I didn't know how we were going to do it. I just felt compelled to do something.
Wow.
Something, which, is the story of my life. Because if I were going to have a tagline, it would just be, kind of like spark transformation, like just ignite a spark. That's what I love to do, is just ignite some kind of a spark in somebody to get something moving or get something going. And then, I'm gonna move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
To just create some kind of ignition and see that magical moment when the lights go on for somebody. For me, that's the juice. It's everything. It is absolutely everything to me. So when I was, then I figured out when I was in high school, I was a tomboy who grew up racing motorcycles and driving a speedboat and snowmobiles and downhill skiing. If it had speed, I was doing it. And then my parents plunked me into an all-girls Catholic school where we had to wear skirts every day in uniforms. You didn't know this, did you?
I love the new information I get in these interviews. I love it.
And so I'm in this class and I have to give a talk about something about my life. And I thought, oh my stars. And I had sat through like a couple of weeks of other people giving talks, bored out of my mind. And I thought, oh, I'm going to talk about something I'm interested in. So I brought in all my motorcycle gear and talked about that. And I realized that if I could talk about things from my own personal life and my own personal experience, that allowed me to connect with people. And I realized that there are a lot of people with a lot of good ideas, but if they can't communicate those ideas to other people, they can't get anywhere. And that's when I realized that actually one of my little gifts that I had been given from, the universe, whatever you want to call it, is the gift of gab. So, I could talk to a tree stump. If it listens, I'll talk to it anyways. So, and so then fast forward to, I don't know, probably the early 1990s, and I stumbled onto this book that I loved. And so because it was a book that takes you through a 12-week process, it's called The Artist's Way. And it takes you through this 12-week process to help you uncover your creativity. And I really wanted to do the book, but I didn't know anybody. I didn't know where there were any classes or anything to take it. So in my never say no attitude, I just called up some friends and said, hey, found this book. It's really cool. I want to do it. Want to come? And I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but the book looked good and I'd heard a bunch of good things about it. So we just started out on a journey of doing it. And I still do those occasionally to this day. I still do those groups once in a while because they're so much fun. And every time I go through it, I pick up a new creative pursuit, which has infused so much life into my life. And I consider racing to be creative. I actually consider racing cars to be a way that I express my creativity. And so it all actually kind of goes back to that book as one of the really big touch points in my whole entire life. And the first time I did it, I just said, I don't have any, I'm not artistic at all. All that talent went to my dad and my brother. I don't have any of that. And not in a negative way. I just didn't think I was creative. I just didn't think I had any artistic talent. And so it's just that I hadn't really tried to do certain things. And I had a bunch of it. I wasn't correct about being able to label what was creative. So there were a lot of things that I did that were creative, but I just wasn't putting a creative label on it. It's something I did.
I've done the same thing. I've said that so many times and had people look at me and, what do you mean you're not creative? But see, for me, the definition of creative is like creating something from nothing. And I'm the person who always has an idea come to me and then I can create from that. So that was my little glitch creativity. Once I realized oh yeah, I'm putting these books together and yeah, there's some creativity involved there.
Well, a ton of it. And also you're very much a visual artist. I actually have some things which are not up because, recently having moved, I haven't gotten everything unpacked at my house yet, but you've made me some little cards and some other things where you've actually done all the drawing and all the graphics on them. I still have them. They actually go up on my little, my friend board. I have all these little things from friends and family that are like really precious to me. And so it goes up on my friend board and I just haven't figured out where is going to be the place of honor of my friend board yet, friends and family board. So it's not unpacked yet because I'm waiting to find the right spot. So I know you're creative in a lot more places.
Isn't that weird? It's bizarre. It's totally bizarre. And one of the things that I love about your creative journey, because I'm sure that I still don't have all the details of it, and I think that something that is really important for the audience to know is that creativity is a journey. Like we latch on to something as the creative thing that we're doing, and then something happens and we get kind of moved to the next thing. So what was that process like for you? What was the first thing you decided to pursue?
Well, the first thing I decided to pursue, I didn't decide. It decided and pursued me. It's just sometimes how it works. So the first thing was writing, actually. When I started going through the artist way for the first time, everything I wrote came out as a poem. Everything. At that time, it came out as rhyming poems. So all of them rhymed and they were hilarious. I mean, shocking. Hilarious. If I'd have thought about it, I'd have brought some of them with, but my kids used to tease me when they were little, they would tease me about having a big butt. Now keep in mind, I was a size 4 at the time, but they were like 4 and 5 years old. So to them, by contrast, sure. I had a big butt. And so I remember writing a poem for them about teasing me about my big butt. So and it all came out rhyming. And then I kept writing, and then I started writing more longer pieces, different kinds of poetry. It stopped rhyming. But what I realized is that I picked up the poetry at the moment that I had shut it down, which was when I was really young, when an uncle had died. And I got a bad review from a family member about a poem I had written for my uncle. And the only reason I got it was because the title of it is He's Gone. And so to be kind of that fresh in the space of He's Gone, and it was all my heartfelt feelings about this favorite uncle, right? And so, I got this bad review of that poem stinks, and, I don't even know what you're trying to say. And because I was pushing up against somebody else who wasn't in the space yet to really be in the grief, right? Like the adult me was that, but the kid me didn't know that. So I was just like, oh, I can't write. And, so I just stopped writing poetry. And then I got into middle school and got the same review from a teacher: you should not write. And it's hilarious, because I got into college and my teacher was like, you're a writer, write whatever you want. So it picked me. And what I've come to understand is that our creative pursuits, all the different ones, they're circling around like a plane waiting for a clear runway. And if we can acknowledge them and bring them in and make space for the first one, that makes space for the next and for the next and for the next. And none of it makes sense at the time. Like, I went to film school in like 2005-ish. I was taking care of my kids. I was kind of working for myself at home, but I got this nudge after having gone through the artist way a bunch of times that I wanted to do film school. I don't know jack about film school, any of it. But I said, you know what? I think I want to do film school. So I got this idea to do it. And then I got an email about what the local university was starting a new certificate program. So you didn't have to matriculate into the university to go to film school. You could just sign up and pay for the certificate program. And so you didn't get a degree in it, but you could go through a year-long certificate program in film school, which I did. It was the best. Wow. Little did I know that like 8 years later, I was going to need it when I had a job where part of my job was to be the public face of the company and do TV shows and come up with a storyline about what we were trying to say about the company in this TV show about us, or what we were trying to say about ourselves in a string of advertisements, or what was the storyline we were trying to say? What does it look like on film? What are the things that you need to be thinking about? Like, if anybody had told me in 2005 that I was going to need it 7 years later, I would have went, yeah, smoke that crack pipe. I'm not going to do anything with this. It's just like a fun thing I'm doing. So it's not an instantaneous thing, and it's definitely not a direct route. Mm-hmm. And, it was that same company that's where I started getting into car racing more actively. Like, I had done it some when my kids were little and realized that I wanted them to have a mom. And so I got involved in other things so that I could be around, because the stuff I was racing was pretty dangerous. And I saw their little faces standing on the side of the racetrack cheering me on. And I thought, man, you know what? I want to be around those little faces get into be adult faces. And so I made a personal decision just for me, and everybody's walk is different, that I was going to do pursuits, but just a little bit less risky until they got older, and which I don't regret that decision at all. It was totally right for me. Yeah, it was totally right for me.
Wow. So you wrote, and then you did film school, mm-hmm. and then what happened? What came after film school?
Well, then I actually went into the training program that you and I met in. I mean, those are the big ones. There's a lot of other smaller ones. Like, I got into photography and did some other things like that. And actually started getting asked to go teach other people through using the book through the way. And so I started, and it's kind of a funny thing when there's all these people, like artists or other people, that you admire their work and admire their approach to things, and then you get asked to share like the stage with them and do it along with them. And so when I got contacted to do this workshop and teach people about creativity, and I thought, well, this is weird. Like, here's like my favorite photographer, one of my favorite painters in this local area, and then another business that's all about art and photography, and then me, like not a bona fide,
right?
Not a bona fide artist, so to speak. And that's actually one of the things that, if I look back on like what's one of the things that has plagued me all throughout my career, I've made friends with this part of myself. And so I've tried to find a funny way to deal with it. And I call it the "Who Do You Think You Are" choir. It's a choir, it's in there singing all the time. Like, who do you think you are to get, into this program with these other people who are like the real deal, and you're doing this creativity thing over here. Like, you don't actually paint. Your photography is not like, and how are you doing that? And, but I've just tried to make friends with that part of myself and know that that choir is going to start singing every time I try and do something new. And so when that choir starts singing, that's a good signal. I'm probably on the right track. Like I even when I woke up this morning, I thought to the choir started singing about doing this thing with you. Like, you know, I like to just be super transparent. So I did. I had a little chirping of, you know, the choir going, what are you going to say? Like, how's this going to go? And I thought, well, I don't know. I have no idea. Like, all I have is me. I only have one story. It's mine. But yeah, that who do you think you are choir goes along in there. And it's the same thing that shows up in business, right? I mean, if we talk about the entrepreneurial journey, I mean, that first business that I did where we were a tiny little company. And I mean, those are pretty phenomenal business results if you just stand back objectively and look at it. In the early 1990s, we were doing gross of $4 million a year at 85% margins. Like that is epic. And we were doing it with like, I think 6 employees, us included as a part of the employees. I think there was a total of 6 of us in the company.
Amazing.
We just got to the fundamental transaction. What's the fundamental thing that needs to happen in the business to serve the customer? And how can we most efficiently as possible deliver that? And for me, that's just business is just another expression of creativity for me. It's another way to express being a creative person. How can we do this in a way that's fun, that's elegant, that's efficient? Because that being able to do it in an efficient manner, consistently, repeatedly, that's what actually makes money in a business. And we don't have to have, one of the things I see all the time is people saying, I have to come up with the most unique idea. We don't. You can do the same thing other people are doing if you just do it better. That's all you can do. You can do the thing that a bunch of people are doing, but if you do it better than anybody else, a level of excellence, that's actually the thing that's going to draw people to you. And our energy and our attitude is going to get to people and situations way before we ever open our mouth, right? Like that whole, and that's been a huge thing for me is just how am I in my mind and in my person showing up in a situation? And because that's going to determine so much about how things go. So
well, and I think being in business, being in business forces you to be creative because you can't be, you know, it's not a 9-to-5 where you're nothing against 9-to-5s, and people use a ton of creativity at their 9-to-5s, but there's something about, you know, a routine where you're doing kind of the same tasks every day and you have something, and in business it's like, how many millions of hats do we have to wear? The employee, the manager, the CEO, the bookkeeper, you know, it's like really, it kind of pushes all of that creativity to the forefront where you really have to figure out some major problem solving solutions very quickly, especially at the beginning if you start to grow quickly.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So when you were in that business and working afterwards, like what were some of those things what were some of the, maybe the problems that you had to tackle or the problems that you never saw coming? You know, I call them those plot holes, right? That kind of make you dig in and find new resources inside of yourself. What were some of those for you?
Yeah, for me, so much of it was the inner game, right? What's going on inside of me and how is that showing up in the workplace? Because part of, and it really goes back to my belief in myself. So like leaving a kind of more predictable job to go into the consulting world, that was a transition. And it wasn't smooth. It wasn't like smooth sailing. No. And I had people. So here's what I've kind of figured out. There's kind of 2 different kinds of things, right? And this is a good question, I think, for the people that are listening to this to ask themselves is, are the people that are in my life gurus or guides? And for me, a guru is kind of somebody who's doing their own thing and you're just a part of their story of them getting where they're getting. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I just mean that they're coming at it from a certain kind of energy, and they're helpful, but the helpful energy is more about them than it is about the receiver. And then I think there are people that are guides. They're there, they have skin in the game in their own way for themselves, and their only skin in the game and telling you something is to help you. That they don't have, there's no agenda around it. And so, and you and I have laughed about this story, but I will give it as an example. So when I very first started racing my car, so here's the thing.
Oh my God, I love this story.
There's street legal cars. They tell you really simple things to remember, right? So the gurus are telling you all this stuff that doesn't mean anything to you, like turn 7 is a late apex, and at the end of the straightaway, wait till you get to braking zone 3 to stand on the brakes. And you know what? When you're a new racer, you brake before you even get to anything that anybody would think you need to brake, because it's terrifying out there. So you brake way early. You brake like way before. It would be like coming up to a traffic light and braking a football field away hard on the brake, right? But that's what you do when you're new. So the gurus come in and they tell you all this kind of stuff, which is fine, and they know a lot, but it's not applicable to the moment. Then there are guides, and they'll come up and just drop like the most basic stuff that is like the most helpful that you need to know. Like, hey, it's a street car. That's a part of the qualifications for running in this series. Empty your glove box. Just take all the stuff out of your glove box. Well, when you're new, you're like, what difference does the glove box make? It's just a glove box. It's just some paper in there. What is the big doggone deal? Until you get out on track and you're hauling down the track and you turn hard into a corner and your glove box comes flying open and everything in it is flying around. So you're trying to drive the car and swat at all of the paper that is now in your face and flying around in the car. And so you have to basically, pull off the track so that you can empty the car of all the things that were in the glove box. That the sweet guides came up to you and just tried to drop it on you, but you couldn't hear it because, frankly, like what's the point of why am I worrying about a glove box, right? They had no in that game. There was nothing that was gonna like be all about them and that. They're just trying to help you out. And in business, I have had so many people that were guides along the way that just tried to give me a little piece of something. Like, I have a friend who's wicked smart, and he's so good with numbers. He can do them like this. And I was involved in a business where I was an independent contractor. And the way the deal was set up is that the company kept a certain amount, and then we as independent contractors kept a certain amount. And it was really lopsided. And so I kept working harder and harder and harder and making less and less and less money because it was an unbalanced financial model. And he saw it like that and told me it's a bad model. But I was so invested in wanting to do the thing that I dismissed the good advice. And I think a lot of us do that, is we dismiss the good advice. Because there, when you go into a business, there's a few things that are going to make or break a business. One is they have to have efficient processes. And then pricing is always the other thing. We have to have enough sales, but we have to have enough profit in the sales that we're getting. And most of the time, people are not looking at how much they're charging for something. They're just running after the sale, but they're not looking at how much of it do they actually get to keep. And that was a huge lesson for me in that arrangement, was understanding that, because I think I sold more than anybody else in those contracts, but it didn't get me further along financially. I got a bunch of other gifts out of it, and I would never take away from everything else that I got out of it. But it's understanding that, and this is just straight up business stuff, but understanding that we have to sell, and then we have to make enough money with what we sell. And that is a very common thing that I see, particularly in entrepreneurial businesses, is people not charging enough for what they're offering. And that's the inner game stuff, because we have to work on the part of us that will believe that we deserve to make that amount of money. And for me, how I can make that determination is, can I give more in the use value of the information I'm giving than in the cash value I'm getting for it, which comes straight out of one of my favorite books. And, you know, and I give more than in use value than what they're paying me in the cash. And I have to make that assessment, because that's the part that's on my integrity, right? I have to make that assessment. And, you know, if I feel like I can continue to do that, you know, over the long haul with a client, then we're in a good spot. And the minute I feel like I can't do that anymore, then, you know, then I need to get somebody else in there who can. So, but yeah, the guides will come in and try and whisper things to you. They will just love you, and they will try to whisper things to you.
Or sometimes they'll just shoot you a text and say, you're never going to offer this for free again.
They might. Wow, that sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, I know. I listen to the guides now. I've had too many falls into those big old plot holes to not be paying very careful attention.
Right? It's just, yeah, pricing is, you know what? I want to do a thing on pricing. I want to do a thing on people structuring their pricing, because really because it's all inner game stuff. It is it okay to charge that? And I'm not sitting up on some spot with that. When I went into consulting, it was really hard for me to ask. It was so hard for me to ask for the amount of money that I had determined was reasonable. And I reasoned it out with some mentors that I really trust. And they said, look, can you give the customer this much in value? And in the beginning, I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
So the other thing I will say that's been a really useful tool for me that I would suggest to people is go back and look at your story. Where did you start from? And what contributions have you made to the people around you? If you just look back at the last 3 years and list like 5 things that you have done for others that have made a contribution. It's such a huge thing. When I got asked to go and speak, the company that I was the co-general manager of, I got asked to go speak about that company to a group that was actually organizing because they were fans of Dr. Deming's work. And if you don't know Dr. Deming, he's the American that went over and turned Japan around after the war, way back in the day, like in the 40s and 50s. Mm-hmm. And he was a US citizen, but the US government sent him over there to help them rebuild. And Toyota, Honda, Sony, some very big name blue chip companies credit him with their success. And, you know, I credit him with any success I've had in business because it was using his business method that has allowed me to replicate certain results when I work with people. But to just go back and look, when I went to talk about what we did at that company, that's when I actually saw the trajectory of where we started and how far we had come. And so if you want to be able to stand inside the energy of what you're offering, do a little excavation back and look at the last couple of years and write the 5 things where you can see it actually made a major contribution to client or a business, friends, family, I don't care what it is. If you can really look at that, because then you can stand in the place of that confidence and that presence to understand what you're offering now in your next thing. Right. And it's something that I just did recently for myself, starting to try and do something new, because I got kind of squirrely with well, how am I going to do this and what's it going to look like? And, and ultimately what I determine is what's the next one thing I have to do. And that doing the next one thing, I get a bunch of answers that then tell me what's the next one thing to do. Because even if the first thing that I did didn't work out, I got a whole bunch of information that now is going to fill in for, okay, so I tried this and it didn't work out. All of this stuff didn't work out the way that I thought it did. So either I can push that aside and say, okay, never mind. Or I can say, well, it didn't work out the way that I thought it did, but I learned all this stuff. And now I can take this next one step. And it's it's just the next one thing, and then the next one thing, and then the next one thing. Because I don't know about your listeners, but for me, that who do you think you are choir, there's perfectionism and fear and all kinds of other stuff that runs around in there. And so if I feel like I have to solve the whole thing, And I do have to have a vision for the whole thing. And I do have to have a plan with details, but I can only do one thing. I can only take one action in any 1 minute. And that one action will beget the next thing and the next thing. And sometimes there's time and space in between action and result, but it's the next one action and the next one action, and then saying it out loud to people in my space. You know, my guides, the people around me. In racing terms, it's the pit crew, right? And for me, it's just the race team, because there is no racer that gets it done by themselves. No one, ever. I don't care who they are. Even if they work on the car themselves and watch, you know, read books and all that stuff, they're reading a book that's telling them how to race, or it's telling them how to fix the car. I mean, nobody does it alone. And most of us have had help from a million people. I know I have, a million people. I have never done anything alone in my life. I cannot take credit for having done it, not a single thing, because, you know, things have shown up and, you know, the universe has conspired to be a part of it with me. So, yeah, that's one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think about the pricing thing too. I love this idea of, you know, having them go back and tracing the value of things. But even then, right, you watched what I just did in the last few months. Like, I've been helping people write books, but I've also been helping them navigate the transformation process that occurs when they're writing. And so at some point I heard myself say this piece about, you know, them going from the character to the narrator to the co-author. And I was like, ooh. And then people kept reflecting that back to me. And I thought, maybe I should turn this into its own thing, because there was so much energy around it. But even after 10 years of watching people navigate that process, for me to put out a new framework, I don't know what the results are going to be. I don't know, right? It's just a new way of doing something. It's a new, so I always say, like, I have to pilot it because it was online. Like, it doesn't cost me anything. I'm going to offer it for free. And holy crap, the results. And so that's when I got the text from you. You are never offering this again for free. I hear you.
And I understand doing pilots, because I'm a big fan of the pilot.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a big fan of that, you know.
But I love it because it's true, you know, the belief in yourself, and it should facilitate it, and the belief in the work itself doesn't happen immediately. Like, sometimes our lightning bolt moments, we innately know how valuable this thing is going to be to the world eventually. Like, we just kind of have that in our core. But once you get into the doing, you're like, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. And then, but that believability that increases over time, that's why my 7-day retreats are 7 days, and they cost what they do now, when I used to do 3 days and charge less than $1,000, because over time I see what people can do with what is done there, and how many results they get from that experience. So I love the pilot experience, and also always have someone like Cheryl in your corner. It's time to start charging for this. And, you know, to do that incrementally, because at some point you will start, and I find this is interesting too, especially service-based, right? Like, you're supporting people, and at first you're that cash value and use value thing, even though it stays the same across time, let's say, but your perception of it doesn't.
Exactly.
Right. And so there's this point where I'm giving, and in the process, I'm learning, I'm building confidence, I'm getting as much out of the exchange as my client is. And then there's this point in the process where I'm like, oh goodness, I have like over given in use value, and now the cash value isn't coming back. Like, now that's a renegotiation of pricing. Right?
Absolutely. And like I said, I'm a big fan of the pilot, because for me, that's all a part of me having confidence in knowing what I can produce. And so the first person I have to convince of anything is myself. And if I can't convince myself, it doesn't matter, because it stops right there. Because if I can't convince myself through a pilot or some kind of a test, then it's not something I want to offer. because I haven't been able to convince myself. So I'm not going to be able to stand in the energy of it with conviction.
Right.
In every situation, it looks different. I mean, one of my early consulting clients, I went and worked with him, and it was in the automotive industry. And so I was looking at their processes, and I like making things visible. So you like making things visible in books. It's a different way that we do it in the business world, but making it visible. And just to give you an idea, I was having a hard time charging my rate for this customer because it was more than I had ever charged before. And so I had some anxiety about charging it, but I believed in Dr. Deming's method. So I had to lean on something I did believe in until I knew what I could offer to the party. So I knew that his method would work if I would use it. And I trusted that because I'd used it before. And the part that I was still learning about myself is, where is the cross-section of his method and the uniqueness that I bring to that journey, and figuring that out. And so I had this thing in my mind about what my mentor had said to me about being able to make sure that you can basically help them make enough money to be able to pay for you. It was basically what his charge was. When you go in, find the things where they're hemorrhaging money and retract that hemorrhage, stop the bleeding. Because the minute you do that, you will have paid for yourself. And the beautiful thing is that you don't pay for yourself just that one time, because if you can help people stop some major hemorrhage that they're unaware of, then they continue to receive the benefit of that amount of money that they keep, like in perpetuity, right? Year after year after year after year. So they paid you once, and so this particular one, so I was like, and I'm telling this story because I want people to have an idea of, you can have anxiety, and if you can find something to step into, it can make a difference. And so I went with shaky, wobbly knees, but I went and I did it because I believed in Dr. Deming. And I knew Deming's stuff. And so I knew that I had done it, and I believed that I could do it for this client. And so I went in there, and by the end of week 2, I found something by them quoting to me the cost of it to them, a $350,000 a year hemorrhage.
Wow.
$350,000 a year, every year for many years. And it was such a simple thing. But in business, we get so used to just doing something that we're not stepping back to say, why am I doing that something?
Yeah.
And, it really was. And so once I understood that, then I could relax into, now what else can I help them with? But so that for me was me being able to prove it to myself. I'm going to go in there, I'm going to do this thing. Because I knew at the end of the day, I could just say, look, I wasn't able to help you and I'm not going to bill you. So that was kind of the deal I made with myself.
Right.
I didn't make it with the client because I didn't want to kind of put that out there. Although my mentor has done that before with people. When he quotes his rate and then they say, well, that's a lot of money. And he goes, okay, well, there's another option. I'll come in, I'll do what I do. I've told you what my rate is. If you don't want to pay it, then after a month of me working with your people, then you decide what you think I'm worth. And if it's enough, I'll stay. And if it's not, I'll leave. Wow. He always gets paid way more than what he would have charged them.
I bet.
When he does it that way. So yeah, it's such an inside job, but we have to take actions on the outside first, and so that's why I love that. Just the next one thing and the next one thing. And it seems so trite and so trivial and ridiculous, but it's a magical thing. Just that next one thing.
Yeah. It really is. It really is. And especially, I mean, how many times have we been coached to do like even a 90-day plan, right? And then, but you take that first step and then everything reorganizes and you're like, what? All that time I spent on the 90-day plan, I could have been spending in action, like just doing the next thing that was in front of me, but whatever. I learned that and then I stopped doing those types of plans. Like, this is, the business plan. Business plan for today. So I love that. And one of the things that I want to make sure that we get to with this audience is, there are some there's some really good, normally I'm asking like, what do you see people really struggling with the most when it comes to business? And you've already answered some of those, but what I'd love to do, because it's so much fun, is have you share some of those things that you've learned like on the racetrack and how you apply those to business. Like that inner game of learning how to race and the things, maybe 2 or 3 things that you learned on the track that, and how they apply to personal growth and business growth.
So listen to your guides when they whisper something to you. The people that will just tell you something brief and straightforward, empty the glove box. Don't give it away for free anymore. Like there's little things. So listen to those in your own inner guide, which like your gut instinct. So the thing with racing is I was at racing school. I'm learning how to race this car. And I was sharing a car with somebody else. So they put you in either an A or a B group. So my car partner was in the A group, which means they run and you watch. And then afterwards, you run and they watch. And so this guy and I are sharing the car, and it's a week-long racing school, and it's high-speed stuff. And so he and I are sharing this car, and on the last day of class, he crashes the car. Like halfway through the day, he crashes the car. So now they're putting me in a new car that I have not driven yet. And it's a similar car, but still, it's, you know how when you get in your own car and if somebody has moved the seat and moved the steering wheel and adjusted everything, and then you get in and nothing feels right?
Yep.
Okay. It's the same thing in racing. There's a certain feeling that a car has, like if it's your own car, you know how fast is it going to take off? Or if you have to jump into traffic, can you get the car to do that, right? So when I got in this new car, even though it was the same brand of car, nothing felt right. And I couldn't get the seat comfortable. I couldn't do all this stuff. And so I come through a section where you kind of go up a hill and then down and then back up a hill and kind of curve to the left and then curve to the right. And I don't know what happened, but I was taking too much speed apparently. And when I curved to the left, I just kept right on curving. I spun right out. So now I'm going backwards on the grass. I mean, probably, I don't know, it's probably going 100 miles an hour. And I'm going backwards on the grass and I'm looking in the rearview mirror and I'm having a oh shit moment because there's a wall behind me. And I'm thinking to myself, in a racing school, they tell you when in a spin, 2 feet in. So you push the clutch, you push the brakes, and then you just steer the car until it stops. Well, I'm going in reverse and they're telling you like when in a spin 2 feet in. I'm thinking to myself, you know what? If I don't get this car to steer, I'm hosed. Like I can't just wait for the car. I have to do something. So I'm like racing in reverse, looking at the rear view mirror. So I'm literally driving in the rear view mirror. I don't do that, but sometimes you got to do that.
Yeah.
And so, and I managed to steer the car away from the wall and get it stopped. And I don't know why I did the series of events that I did other than just trusting my gut instinct. I trusted my gut. Even though in school they had told us do this, 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 and this, I started doing what they told me. And then I thought, if I continue to follow that advice, I'm going to hit the wall. Mm-hmm. If I do nothing, I'm for sure going to hit the wall. If I do something, I'm taking the chance I won't hit the wall. And so I trusted what I just innately felt like was the right thing to do in the situation, even though it went against everything they told me. Because I just felt like I'm hosed if I do what they tell me. So I get back into class and my instructor running into the classroom, screaming, cheering, clapping. He runs over and gives me this big hug. And I'm thinking he's like teasing me, right? He's like, oh my gosh, that was the most awesome thing ever. And there were curse words in there, but I'm trying to keep it a little bit clean. And so I was like, what, Peter? And he goes, no, seriously. And I go, okay, smart ass, like whatever. And he goes, no. In all my years of instructing at this school, you are the first person I have ever seen spin out at that section of the track and not hit the wall. That's the exact place where your car sharing partner crashed the car. He goes, how did you know to do what you did? And I said, I didn't. I just trusted my gut instinct. And so for me, trusting my gut instinct in my personal relationships, in my business relationships, in my business decisions, like has served me so well. And how many of us have gotten nudges that we didn't listen to? like, I'm not wearing it right now, but I have this little brace right here because I'm rehabbing from, breaking my wrist, helping some family do some things. And I didn't listen to my gut. My gut told me, you've been doing this for 2 months, like long days, like 12, 14-hour days, doing this stuff to help a family member, moving heavy machinery, working on cars, like doing all this stuff that I was happy to do. But on that night when I broke it, I was just really tired. And I did not listen to myself when I thought, I really just need to go home. Like, I know the guys need me here, but I just need to go home. And I didn't listen. And within 2 hours, and I mean, it wasn't like a little break. It's been like, get a plate put in, have surgery. Like, there's a whole rehab that's going on around it. And so it's an extreme example of not listening to my gut, but nonetheless, it's the truth. Like,
Yeah.
So there's these moments when the consequence can be little or really big. And that one was, the consequence was really big, but it was also like, how much harder now is it going to be for me to not listen to my gut? Because I have a really severe, scars and all kinds of stuff as a reminder to, and a titanium plate. I'm now like, I don't know, titanium and iron. I'm an iron woman. Wonder Woman. So, yeah. So for me, the gut, trust in the gut thing is a big one. And then, that's such a big one. And then things are never quite as easy as they seem like they will be. When you go to some of these races that we do and you're standing on the outside, because there's high speed races and then there's lower speed, but really technical races. And so the low speed races, everybody thinks they can do it because they sit in the bleachers and they watch and it looks so simple. Like, what is the problem? And so things aren't always on the inside how they appear on the outside. Because when you're sitting out on the stands, it's like, whatever. And you've ridden with me on the low speed stuff. So you know what it's like when you're actually in the car. There's a lot of things you're trying to do at the same time and trying not to spin the car out.
Right.
And trying to remember what part of the track and, to go fast. Because sometimes you have to actually go slow to go fast. And when you and I were there that day, I kept watching everybody mess up at exactly the same place on the track. And I watched and I watched and I watched and I watched, and I thought, everybody's overcooking that corner. They're going into it too fast. So they're hitting the brakes at the time when they should be accelerating to pick up speed. Because if you go in slower, then you can hit the gas going out of the corner. Because usually you'll come out of a corner and onto a straightaway. But you can just put the throttle all the way down and just cook. But everybody kept going in too fast, and then they'd be on the brake when they should be on the gas. And a lot of times it's like that in business. We get into something and we just go way too fast at a certain point, and then we spin out. And then other people cook right on past us because they figured out. There are moments where you actually have to slow down and pay attention so that you can actually hit the gas going on the straightaway. And it's tricky to find those spots, but I watched. For me, I pay a lot of attention to a lot of things around me, not in like a ranking or rating or comparison thing, but as a way to learn. Mm-hmm. I don't, okay, I see how that looks. I don't want to be doing that thing, or I don't want to do it in that way. And it isn't a criticism of anybody else. It's just that way wouldn't work for me. And so what way would work for me? And so I watched and watched and watched and watched. And I was really slow to get out on the track, like to the point that people were coming up and hassling me. Are you ever going to take your car out there? And I think there was.
Because your car is so sexy, they wanted to see it on the track.
She is pretty. She is pretty. I just love her. Oh, look, one of my friends actually made me a, what do you call this? A
model? Oh my gosh.
It's a Mattel, why can't I think of what they call these cars right now?
The Matchbox car?
They made a model. They took a car that was already made and then did the whole thing to look exactly like my car.
I love it.
That's like a make-believe version of my actual car. She is pretty sexy.
Yeah.
And so I was late getting out on track because I was getting the car set up and I was watching everybody. And so everybody was wondering why I was there if I wasn't running. And I think after watching everybody, I think on my third run, I was like third fastest on the track, the 75 cars or something. Because I watched and I assimilated all the information, and that I decided for myself how I was going to do it based on what I saw people doing right and based on what I thought were ways that were slowing people down unnecessarily.
Yeah.
You know, and so, and that, I mean, in business, right? How many times can we look around and say, wow, that person's really doing something well, and I don't want to copy them, but I can take a note of, you know, what that looks like, and then how can I make my business reflect me the way that person has made their business reflect them, you know? So I can be inspired by other people, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And, you know, and learn from what they're doing. So
yeah. And that's the reason for the show. This is what the show was birthed out of, because I felt like, you know, around 2013, I had all of my mentors saying, it's time, you know, it's time. You've got the book, you've got the speaker presence, you've got like all this, like run at it. But when I when I sat down and listened to that gut instinct, I felt like I had a few amazing models, but even their style, which was completely amazing and powerful and totally aligned with their truth, did not feel good to me. Selling from the stage, even though she's a total badass at it, I don't want to do it like that. It didn't work for me when I tried it, right? Or these different things. And so for me, this whole experience of this TV show is me trying to help, you know, the larger audience kind of get connected with that part of themselves that goes, you know, I don't know why every time I'm in one of these rooms, I feel icky right here. Like, to validate the feelings that you get so that you can like take a moment and be mindful and say, what is it about this moment that I don't like? Is it the presentation, or is it, you know, like there are all these potential possibilities for what isn't going right, but like, and I know that's the work that you do with the Deming stuff, is like making all of that stuff visible. You know, if you pay attention, then you can say, oh, it's right here. And then if you're in enough of those places, watching enough of those people, then you can start to see patterns and say, okay, now that's the thing I don't want to do now. How do I do this differently? Which is a whole other conversation. It was really easy for me to go, I hate that, and I hate that, and I hate that, and I'll never do that, right? But you know, what does that mean for me? That was a whole other personal journey. So I love that idea. I love it. And really, truly, like when you're talking about, I mean, long-term consequences of not paying attention to this type of stuff, monetary, hemorrhaging 350 grand a year, holy moly, right? But that started with a $30 hemorrhage, a $3,500 hemorrhage, a $35,000, like, you know, maybe it could have been caught a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is it was people being unconscious about a solution they had put in place to do something. They just, well, the reality is they were unconscious about needing to put in a solution. And so rather than designing a way to do something, it was just growth by words. And it was like, well, we'll just, you know, when we need that thing, we'll just go find it somewhere on the premises. Well, if the thing you need to go find on the premises, you're having to go find those things all day, every day, and they're never in the same place, like, you know, if you're spending, you know, if each employee is spending an hour of their day looking for those things, and you employ whatever it was, 75 people or whatever it was, dollarize it. I mean, so it's not everybody's looking for a big, huge things, you know, like a big thing. And it's the way that we have decided to handle something in our business. It's just a simple thing. It's the way we've decided to approach it. Yeah. And it's like real basic, you know, it's some real basic thing. And and honestly, today's solution is going to be tomorrow's problem. The way we're solving something today, it's the way we need to solve it today. But as we grow the thing that we did to solve something today is going to be a problem later. And so we have to go back and continue to look. And
Yeah.
which, you know, is kind of like going back in our personal life and looking at, you know, for the last few years, like, where are the ways that I've made contributions? Where are the ways that I've done things, and be able to stand in that presence? And it's the flip side of that, you know, is what are these things that I did to solve a problem that are now, you know, creating an issue for me now. It's your 21-day program, right? It's all of these things that we did and learned, and it's the way we approach things, and it was all necessary for survival.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, rewriting that story, but first the story had to get written, and now we have to be aware that we need to rewrite it. And, you know, I mean, I'm just going to say to the people, you need to take that program that Amanda had. It is just saying.
It surprised me. I'm just going to say it was one of those things that like downloaded and it's for the world, and I'm not even going to take any credit for it. It surprised me the way that it came out. So
yeah, well, you were present to it though.
Yeah.
You were present to the family.
For you, where do you practice? Like for you, what are those practices for you that kind of keep you in your center and paying attention to those details that you need to pay attention to?
That is a good question. And meditation is a big thing for me. Being able to just go quiet and within, and I have a sitting meditation practice, and, you know, which honestly I've been a little hit or miss with since I broke my wrist. I don't, you know, it's an interesting thing to have this happen, and then it's kind of thrown off a lot of my kind of foundational stuff that I do. I did a lot of meditation when I was in the hospital in pain. I'll tell you that. It was very good for that. So meditation is a big thing for me. Writing continues to be. And, you know, it was interesting. I was just looking at my papers right before we got on here, and I picked up something that I had written. It was actually in one of my books by, you know, one of my favorite authors. And there's a list of things that I wanted to do in this new house, do, buy, get, whatever, for the new house. And I wrote it probably, I don't know, 3 months ago now, 2 months ago, because, you know, it's an evolution when you move, trying to get things set up right. And so before we started, I was looking at that list, and I started checking off a bunch of things that have happened. And so that's also another tool that I use to stay grounded, is to write things down. I like to write things down and then go back and refer to it regularly. But even if I don't, there is some kind of magic that keeps me mindful and grounded if I just write it down. There's like an energetic something that happens with taking, and, you know, everybody has their own way. I'm a pencil and paper girl, and I'm a longhand, write it down. Half the time I can't even read it. It's so sloppy, but it's just the discipline of doing it. So the writing, whether it's just writing, journaling, or making a list of things either to do or that you want to receive or accomplish or buy or whatever it is, there's some kind of magic that happens when it gets written down. So that's a huge one for me. And then I have a community around me that I rely on. And, you know, and I refer to it, you know, in racing, I didn't get anywhere in racing by myself. And, you know me well enough to know that I'm a humanist. I don't pick sides about anything. Like, I believe in the human race. So I'm a co-ed girl, and the guys have been as helpful to me in racing and in my life as the women have. And so I think if we, you know, so I never want to leave the guys out of anything, because they have made such a contribution to my life. And I know you feel the same way, you know, that it takes all of it. It takes all of it. But, you know, there's always been a team around me that I've been a part of. So because it always takes a team. And at different times, different people on the same team are going to be the lead.
Yep.
And it's important to learn how to move in and out of that, and to be able to make space. And, you know, so I love to be around people that are way more talented than me, so I can, you know, watch them do their magic. And, you know, and I've surrounded myself with people who are really wicked talented, and who also can see my talents and acknowledge that. And, you know, I think that's an important thing for me, is a part of what keeps me grounded and mindful, is having people around me that can call a thing out when it needs to be called out. Like, what's that about? You know, or getting what's happening over there, but who can also say, like, hey, check this out, or hey, I love you, or whatever it is. And that for me, being a part of, a team, a tribe, I don't care, whatever you want to call it, a circle, has been invaluable to me in my entire life. And I've played mostly team sports my entire life. And, it's been very satisfying to be a part of a group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know where I'd be without my team. And the teams change over time too. Sometimes it's hard to let go of that team for this next race, but man, can't do anything without them.
Yeah.
So our rapid fire round of questions.
Yeah.
I bet I could guess. What was the first book that really changed your life?
Well, there were two of them that came into my life at about the same time, which is The Artist's Way and Dr. Deming's The New Economics. So the two of them came in at around the same time, I would say. So for that one, yeah, you know what? Both of those are the two that came in first, and also the ones that changed my life the most. Like hands down, the ones that have changed my life the most.
Would you say they're your favorite books?
They are two of my favorites, but I currently have, I'm going to say, an author that's my favorite. I couldn't hone it down to just one of his books, but I'm reading a bunch of stuff by Wallace Wattles right now. Science of Getting Rich, how to promote yourself, how to get what you want. I love his stuff, because it's all mindset, inner game stuff. And it was written way back, I want to say in like 1910, I think. So they're really old. And he was contemporary of James Allen, As a Man Thinketh, I think was the name of it. And, later on Napoleon Hill came out. But for me, the way Wallace writes in his books, so right now, he's currently like my favorite author. So, he's got so many writings to choose from, take your pick.
Yeah.
But three that I named are like three of my favorites.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Would you say that he's your favorite messenger?
I would say that Deming is my favorite messenger. Yeah, because Deming can transform education, politics, business, a country, the way we raise our kids. The guy was a genius, and that word is way overused. I mean, he was the things that he predicted, he's been dead since 1993. But I have his videos of all of his teachings, his books, and I am still learning from him all the time. And the dude left in 93. Mm-hmm. But all these things that he predicted back then are all happening now. He predicted what was going to happen in our world. And he left it, and all of those things are still manifesting. So, and they weren't all things that he wanted to see manifested. He was trying to give us information so they wouldn't have to get manifest. So yeah, hands down, all-time favorite messenger ever, because his stuff is so far reaching. Yeah. I love guys. Yeah. My dad's pretty much one of my favorite messengers too. He's good, smart. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, how can our audience connect with you after this if they want to know more about ponytail racing and the coaching and consulting you're doing?
Well, my website, coincidentally, is being updated right now. So, but you can go on to it. It's still there. It's just, there's an opt-in. So you can go to my website and opt in. It's ponytailracing.com. So you can go to the website and opt into the mailing list. And when I get all of it synthesized and have all my new programs written out, then I can let you know about it.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your amazing wisdom and laughter with the audience.
Yeah.
And me. I love it. I think the number one thing that you've helped me to do is to keep this whole transformation thing as light as it can be. Yeah, you're coming in hot in that turn. To me, that just keep it light. That's what you do.
It can be fun. Yeah, it can be fun. It was in way too many rooms where it was way too serious.
Yeah.
You wore me out. Yeah.
You
so, and we're both a little bit subversive, so I like that. Let's go good. Thank you
All
for
right.
having me. You know, you're one of my nearest and dearest.
Yes, yes. I do. I do appreciate you on so many levels, and I know our audience will too. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for listening in. And please, please, please feel free to go to the website, True to Intention, post comments on this video. Tell us what you learned and what you're taking home with you. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.